Two things are quite obvious today. The first thing, I am reviewing a monitor. The second thing is, I think 34-inch ultrawide is as good as it gets here for me to fit on the desk, because not even the whole foot did make it on it. Otherwise, I want to address one thing that I've seen a lot of people being concerned about, and that is the fact that this is a 34-inch ultrawide with a resolution of 2560 by 1080 and not the more commonly used 3440 by 1440. This means we have a lower DPI, and people are just concerned about that this is not sharp enough. Here is my TLDR. It actually works way better than I expected it. It's way easier to push this screen, and it's just noticeably cheaper. I will get a little bit more in depth after I cover the qualities and the ergonomics, which I want to actually start off right now. So let's take a look at it, and here you can see it. This would it be all the way down, where the display starts at 10 centimeters. All the way up, it starts at 22, so we have a height adjustment of 12 centimeters. Definitely more than good enough. On the side, we can see it all the way back. Here halfway straight forward and all the way to the front. That's not a whole lot, but it never really felt to me like that wouldn't be good enough. Now here you can see the foot, it definitely works out good and it looks also nice. As we can see, the bezel 15 millimeters wide. It gets a little bit better, but is still absolutely fine, because especially on the back it almost looks too good because it looks like a jet fighter. Now in terms of ports, we have DisplayPort, 2 HDMIs, of course the DC in, and it's nice to see that a thin cable gets to that and you don't have the big clunky one. Otherwise, you can see the USB port where you're connected to the PC, so you can use those two Type A ports as well, along as with a headphone jack and for the line out. So all is good here. Here you can see the left speaker and the right speaker. And for the controls, this would be my highlight, because we have this joystick that is just the most convenient solution that I've seen so far for controlling the display. Talking about the controls, let's check the OSD. Here you can see the main menu, and if you use the controls or the joystick, you will see the menus here, and just real quick get to those. In the quick settings, you have brightness, contrast and volume. You can of course change the inputs. Here on the picture you have modes, for example some presets as you can use them. As you can see here, you can change of course once again the brightness, contrast, but also the sharpness along with Super Resolution Plus. One thing that I would not use, because just changing the sharpness or just leaving it at 50 is already way more than good enough. Otherwise you can change the response time in 3 different steps. You can turn on and off FreeSync. You have black stabilizer, definitely something very handy for games. Of course, as well with 1 millisecond motion blur reduction, and the crosshair, as you can see that here. As you can see here, we can also change. We have 3 available gammas. We have a color temperature control. We can even have a 6 color adjustment if you want to get into it a little bit and calibrate your screen. Otherwise, you can see here generals. So this is pretty much already it. But what I think is actually the highlight is the software, because we have the LG software that pretty much allows you to change all those things you have in the OSD way more conveniently with your mouse on the monitor. And this is definitely my highlight, the screen split option, because you can easily set different screens, and on a 44-inch this makes, or on an ultra wide, it actually makes a lot sense. And you can easily drag those split screens around, which is not possible on some other software. So I really like that. Otherwise, you can quickly here see how the scaling works, and I will get into that a little bit later afterwards, but I just want to give you a quick glimpse here. Now, just real quick for the values, we have 90% sRGB and 76% of Adobe RGB. In my opinion, still fine. The gamma was a little bit off with 2.4 instead of the 2.2 that are desired. And in terms of brightness, and I think you can't really properly see this, we have just about 230 lux, which is definitely not that great. The black levels could be a bit better, the contrast as well, and the white point is on the colder side, but I don't see this an issue, and I will get into that a little bit later in the qualities of the panel itself. Now let's check the viewing angles here. This would be all the way back, and it looks actually a little bit less than it actually looks in reality, because it picked up quite a lot of my studio lights. As you can see here, all the way front, so viewing angles are definitely stable, because after all it is an IPS display, which you will also see here from the sides. Everything is top stable. Sorry for my sore throat. Here you can see the white looks maybe a little bit overexposed, so you can see the uniformity. So let's check it here with a little bit more of underexposure. You can see the white definitely is quite nice, and actually looks worse here because on pictures it never really gets it. This is what you usually see, so a very nice white obviously. Now the blacks, which are maybe even more so important, you can see them with normal proper light. You can see that it pretty much looks like the screen is off, but it isn't, because turning off the light and now overexposing it completely, you are able to see the backlight bleed, and it is visible in all 4 corners, especially on the lower left one. But I would say this, or maybe even this, is what you see more in reality, so I wouldn't bother about it. It is visible in games, but it never really bothered me, because it's actually quite subtle after all. Now Let's talk about the video qualities or the panels qualities, and I have to say I really like what I've seen here, because once calibrated or a little bit adjusted, because out of the box it looked a little bit too dark for me, you get a really nice sharp video, and especially for 1080p videos or ultra-wide 1080p videos, this looks so nice. And as you can see, your even videos are really an enjoyable experience because you can play all the games. I don't want to play this too much because I don't know if I will get flagged, but I also have to say that even my own video looks nice. Colors are actually quite okay. Of course, over the camera it doesn't look so much like it, but I am pleased with the colors. I like the overall experience. I don't have any problems. Everything looks natural, but also vibrant and vivid. And that's why I already want to go into the gaming here. Of course, one thing we have to point out, which you of course won't see on the video, is that this is a 144 Hz FreeSync panel. I couldn't use FreeSync since I have an Nvidia card, but it already worked quite out nice. And this is one thing that I'm super happy about, because 144 Hz works quite nice already, even if you don't have FreeSync. So you can get high frame rates. Of course, you don't have the great adaptive sync, but it still works fine, absolutely, because games are nice and playable. Everything looks nice, it's sharp. I have to say that you see a little bit of some minimal ghosting and some motion blur going on after all, so it's not perfect, and especially on this game it's more obvious, but I think this is also due to the game. But you get a nice smooth experience, and I can't really complain about it. It makes a great job after all, because I could play all the games real nice and smooth, and it was a great enjoyable experience, because 144 Hz is still absolutely impressive. The input lag, in my opinion, was absolutely top, because I'm not a competitive gamer, and maybe then a TN panel will be even better, but for the IPS panel it was nice. I think it could have been during movement a little bit sharper sometimes. It seems like just a little bit motion blur was still going on, but I wouldn't really bother about it, because the gaming experience was still after all so great. And especially here, if you look at games, this was just so great. Racing games, of course, you don't notice the high frame rates so much, but it definitely makes up for a great experience. So overall, I have to say, very, very good for gaming. I liked it a lot. It's not perfect, but for the price that you get here, it's absolutely fine. So the next thing that I want to go into would be already the pros. Would be already just before I'm going into the pros and cons, I want to cover the sharpness once again, because what I want to point out is, this is what I would say. If you want to for movies, it's great, because after all, a lot of TVs are still way more high res, or I mean way bigger, and you don't have the problems with the resolution, so it's fine. For videos it's really great. And sorry for getting a little bit shaky, something went just a little bit wrong. But for games, you have to decide that, and only you. I can tell you that it was great to play games, because it's a very immersive effect here with the curved screen. But it's just not super sharp, and especially someone like me who's used 25 inches with 34p, it is just noticeably not that sharp, not that high res. But it works, because you get a great gaming experience. You don't have to have the highest NPC to have such a big display, and you can push those higher frame rates than you usually get on those 1440p panels with ultra-wide way easier. One thing where I would say this is definitely not a perfect panel for is for main use, because browsing the web and so on works, but I don't think it would be all that comfortable for a longer period of time. What I did it for, it was fine, but using this as my main monitor for especially productivity, where I need the screen real estate and the high resolution, this was maybe not so much perfect, because if you have maybe a side monitor for your normal stuff and this just for gaming, then it would be actually a definitely great solution. But now I would say let's get into the pros and cons, and I will just, as always, just cheat a little bit and check here my notes. First of all, a very good design. I really liked it, especially the flexibility, because you can also, as you can see here, just change the angle. If it's not proper, you have height adjustments and everything, only you don't have swivel, but it's something that isn't really all that important. We have great controls. I really like the joystick, because so far it's the most convenient thing that I've used, and we have the software, which makes things even easier. We have a big curved screen. I definitely like that, because it is immersive and it gives you a real great experience after all. We have absolutely stable viewing angles. The IPS display here has no issues at all, but we have a very good white, even though just a good black. It could be a little bit deeper, and we after all had some backlight bleed, even though in my opinion it was acceptable. The color accuracy was actually quite good. Once calibrated, it was even better out of the box. It wasn't bad, but it was just a little bit too dark, but nothing that really bothered me. Then, like I said, we have low motion blur and low input lag. It could be even a little bit better maybe, But for this price range, I can't complain. It's really great to see. A good port selection because after all, we have 2 HDMIs and the display port. We have 144 Hz with FreeSync. Like I said, I couldn't try that one out, but even without, it works quite nice, and this is what's important for me. Then, very good for video. Very impressive, very sharp, very nice with great colors. And definitely at least very good, if not even a little bit better for video games. And the value of around $600, what I've seen, actually is absolutely solid. But of course, since this is not the highest end monitor, it comes with a few downsides. What are these? In my opinion, this would be, as I said, the relatively low DPI. Easier to push, yes, but just not as sharp. And if you are used to that, it is a little bit of a bummer. So you will have to get used to that. But getting such a big screen, after all, doesn't come cheap usually. Otherwise, as I said, games could feel a little bit sharper. So a little bit of motion blur was still there, but it's not all that bad. Not very bright. This is something that I have to point out because it's actually my second unit and my first unit was even dimmer, but I've seen people that review units are a little bit wonky here. So this panel was already a little bit brighter. If you boost the contrast, you can get even to 300 lux, but I was about 250 lux here. Not the very brightest, and I've actually used it with 100% all the time. I could have got with a little bit lower, but I don't really have much reserves here anymore. It is with 100% a little bit brighter than it has to be, but not a whole lot, especially compared to the multi monitors that I've had in the past. This is a little bit on the lower end of the spectrum. Then IPS lottery and the IPS downsides, because after all, we have IPS glow. It wasn't actually bad here at all, but it is a lottery because especially the backlight bleed is something where you can get good units or bad units. But so far on all the LG monitors that I've seen, it actually seems very good. And the backlight bleed that you have seen on the pictures, in my opinion, was absolutely acceptable. I've seen way worse here, but it is to be pointed out, IPS still has this kind of a drawback. And then the last thing, I don't think this is perfect as a main device or a main display, because especially browsing over a longer period of time and is a little bit cumbersome, and you just don't have the best screen real estate because everything is just way too big. So if you're further away, okay, but you just can't fit so many elements on it because after all, this is comparable to a 27-incher with 1080p. So not the best for a high resolution experience and for a lot of screen real estate. But this would have been it. Considering the price of around $600 though, I have to say the experience is great because you get a big screen, you get a high amount of frames, 144 Hz is great, and you get a super solid high quality gaming experience because the qualities of the panel are really good. You can't really blame it to be a 1080p because in this price range, you just can't expect more. If you want 1440p, you are limited to 100 Hz, and those usually cost at least double the price here, at least starting at $1,000. And this is a completely different ballpark, and you will have to have a way more powerful gaming PC. So if you want to play with a big screen, with a lot of frames, with a great experience, on not that high of a budget, this seems to be one of the best solutions because I've checked the market and this seems to be the only IPS 34-inch ultrawide with that resolution. There are some other ones with a different technology, but this is something that you have to check. But all of those compared, this actually looks to be one of the best ones out there. And this is where I want to leave it. I hope you liked the review. Maybe a thumbs up and a subscription, and leave me any comments down there below what you think. Is this high res enough or is it absolutely not okay? Okay, this would have been it. Until next time. Bye.